Amy Crocker was an heiress, princess, bohemian, world traveller, mystic and author, known for her collections of husbands and lovers, adopted children, Buddhas, pearls, tattoos and snakes. A true progressive who disdained prejudice of all kinds, racial, sexual and gender. Her radical beliefs made her a target of disapproval from her snobbish peers. Amy was dubbed the Queen of Bohemia in the 1910s. While perhaps not as well known today as other Gilded Age heiresses, Amy was one of the most enduring personalities of her day. Great journeys often start with a mystery. For Amy Crocker, the late 19th century railroad heiress, the mystery arose when she was just a small child. According to her 1936 memoir, one evening in the late 1860s or early 1870s, she scrambled up the staircase of her home ahead of her nanny and saw something which a child's mind is better able to process than an adult. In her room, bathed in the light of a full moon, a spectral woman lay on her bed, dressed in magnificent silk robes and a gossamer veil, unlike any attire the young girl had ever seen. She later learned it was the dress of a Hindu noble. The apparition looked at Amy and smiled. She seemed to know me, wrote Amy decades later. It was somehow, I can hardly explain it, as though I knew her too, as though she were there naturally, as if she belonged to me. Unafraid and excited, the girl called for her nanny to come over, but the apparition had vanished. The breathless old lady scolded her, but Amy's imagination was already fired up. Who was this woman? Was there some connection between them? This encounter was something Amy would never forget, and it would inspire her journeys to the Far East, seeking answers to life's mysteries. Amy was born on December the 5th, 1864 in Sacramento, California. Her parents, Judge Edwin B. Crocker and wife Margaret, were activists, abolitionists and philanthropists of extravagant wealth. In 1875, at the age of 10, Amy inherited $10 million when her father died, a sum that would be equivalent to roughly $250 million today. As a young girl growing up in California, she was pleased to show off to her parents her newly learned talent. She had been taught to swear by the sailors who frequented San Francisco's docks. Five years later, her mother sent her to a school for young ladies, in the hopes that it would soften her forceful personality. And so, in 1877, she was sent to Dresden, Germany, along with the daughters of 5 other wealthy West Coast families, for finishing under the chaperonage of a respectable San Franciscan widow named Mrs. Burrage. At age 16, she became engaged to a German prince. But after she broke off the engagement, she promptly fell under the spell of a dashing Spanish toreador before her family could stop her. Once back in the United States, Amy scandalized her family by eloping with Richard Porter Ashe, another prominent San Franciscan. But the romance quickly faded when she realized he was spending far more time and money at the racetrack than with her, and publicly gadding about town with an assortment of debutantes. Shortly after the birth of their daughter, Alma, the marriage ended in divorce, and Ashe was eventually awarded custody of their daughter. She had no time to mourn the loss. While at a party, a casual invitation from King David Kalakaua to visit his tropical paradise was all it took for Amy to hire a 70-foot schooner complete with crew to take her to Hawaii, where she delighted in racing along its beaches on horseback, danced the hula, and wore local dress and nothing much else. Needless to say, the missionaries who had been sent to convert the islanders to Christianity were not impressed. Luckily, King David was. He bestowed upon her a Hawaiian name and declared her princess of a small island of some 300 inhabitants. Her next port of call was Tokyo, where she lived as an aristocrat, and took up with a Chinese feudal warlord who spirited her off to Shanghai on his yacht, festooned with exotic silks. In Indonesia, Amy is said to have accompanied a Bornean prince to a remote jungle village where, after taking in the lush exotic greenery and staring in awe at the profusion of wildlife, she suddenly found herself the target of locals trying to kill her for fear their prince intended to take a white woman as his eventual queen. She managed to escape in a dugout canoe, floating down river for days before reaching a Dutch settlement. That hair-raising escape would mark Amy's last great adventure. But it was in Bombay where she would finally start to disentangle the mystery that had fueled her 10-year exploration of the Far East. Her great revelation began with a yogic text that a Maharaja gifted her, and another fantastical vision she claimed to have seen around the same time. Late one night, Amy returned to her hotel room, and while winding down after her busy day, she glanced at the mirror and caught a glimpse of something shimmering behind her. She quickly turned around to confront the apparition. It was the same beautiful ethereal woman she had seen as a child lying on her bed. Dressed in fine silk robes and crowned with a ring of pearls, the woman slowly arose, sat on the bed, and reached her hand out to Amy. Fearless, Amy took a step forward. The mysterious ghost immediately vanished. Not long after this vision, Amy learned of an Indian yogin, renowned for his ability to explain the mysteries of life and death. She became determined to visit him, eventually traveling to Pune, India, to find him. While many visitors were turned away, Bhojaveda's attendants inexplicably allowed her to enter his cave, where the old man appeared out of the murky dark. His perfectly white hair hung to his waist and his beard to his knees, Amy wrote. His skin seemed to be wax, and one could notice that the fingers and the flesh of the face were actually translucent. According to her telling, the Yogin spoke to her in a language she didn't understand, and a vision of a young Indian boy dressed in the robes of a Hindu noble miraculously arose in front of her. Finally, he evaporated, and the Yogin turned around and disappeared into the darkness. Amy had no idea what to make of the experience, but as she walked away, an attendant approached her and spoke in English. He said that the young boy in her vision was Amy in a past life, and that the spectral woman she had seen as a child was her mother, who was watching over her. The great mystery of the beyond would remain unknown to her in this lifetime, the attendant said, but she would see the vision one more time, just before her death. You may imagine for yourself the effect that such an interpretation had on me, Amy later wrote. I left with a new passion and a new fear. In 1888, Amy had embarked on explorations in the Orient. She travelled over 6 years with Commodore Henry Mansfield Gillig, whom she would take as her second husband in 1889. Commodore Gillig was a yachtsman, amateur opera singer, and a sleight-of-hand artist. The Gilligs settled in a townhouse at 439 Madison Avenue, and a large waterfront estate in Larchmont, New York, where Henry was Commodore of the Yacht Club, and Amy raised prize-winning French bulldogs. The marriage lasted for a decade. When the Gilligs divorced in 1900, Amy's next husband, Jackson Guru, was waiting in the wings. A decade younger than Amy, they had initially met at the Buddhist colony she had organized at her Madison Avenue townhouse. A popular ragtime songwriter, he was perfectly suited to Amy's unconventional lifestyle. The couple got tattoos of coiling snakes bearing each other's initials on their arms, attended the opening night of every new Broadway play, and went on slumming tours of seedy lower Manhattan neighborhoods, accompanied by Chuck Connors, a Tammany Hall operator who reputedly ruled Chinatown's underworld. The couple also adopted 2 children, a boy and a girl named Reginald and Yvonne. Around the same time, Amy was reunited with Alma, later changed to Gladys, her 15-year-old daughter from her first marriage. 2 years later, Gladys married Guru's younger brother Powers, making her Amy's sister-in-law as well. As if all this wasn't enough fodder for the press, a fire consumed her Larchmont mansion. Undeterred, Amy built a larger one to replace it, and the mysterious poisoning of some of her prize-winning bulldogs kept her in the headlines. Amy's enlarged family moved between San Francisco, Paris and New York. In 1903, Amy purchased a new townhouse there, at 46 West 56th Street. It was also the scene of some of Amy's legendary entertainments. Mixing together the famous and the infamous, they were events where politicians, maharajas and literary figures could rub shoulders with opera singers, Broadway showgirls and Bowery boys. One of her most famous, perhaps, was her Dance of All Nations party, which featured performances of a Salome dance, the Vienna Wiggle, and a cannibal who danced wearing little more than coconut oil and a red sash. Amy, swathed in pearls that would clothe a baby and ransom a king, first danced an Argentine tango before returning later with a 12-foot snake twined around her to perform La Danse de Cobra. When guests backed away from the snake's darting tongue, she admonished, "It's as gentle as a powder puff." Of her half-dozen siblings, Amy was the wild child, an unapologetic rule-breaker, an inspiration to nonconformists everywhere. While other women were just starting to venture into European capitals, she was plunging deep into jungles and sailing across oceans. She spurned racist, colonialist and sexist ideologies, brazenly crossed class boundaries and embraced non-Christian religions, to the scandal of American high society. Even by today's standards, however, Amy was naive in her moneyed privilege and remarkably louche. She claimed to have had a sexual awakening with an Indian boa constrictor, and she had countless affairs in addition to her 5 husbands. It was also a different era, and with today's cancel culture devotees, some of the remarks in her book might be considered as culturally insensitive. Thankfully, she was also a captivating storyteller, and never let boring facts get in the way of a good yarn, especially not her own life story. Amy's bucket list of accomplishments would make the pale in comparison bohemian poser of today positively green with envy. Here is a list of her accomplishments. Had romances with powerful men on several continents, some decades younger than her. Orchestrated a drinking game with the sharp-witted Oscar Wilde and other genius men of letters in the rough Barbary Coast district of San Francisco. Was the first English-speaking woman to spend time in a harem, lived in the Chelsea Hotel of Paris with artist neighbours such as Rodin, Matisse, Jean Cocteau and Isadora Duncan, who entertained Picasso at their studios. Went to the red light district of Hong Kong by rickshaw, hung out at an opium den, paid to free an addicted slave prostitute, got matching tattoos with her new beau before the ink on her divorce decree from her second husband was dry, purchased a home in Paris which was quickly dubbed the House of Fantasy by the press, provided sumptuous accommodations for a few exiled Russian noblemen who plotted a counter-revolution, and various down-on-their-luck artists, including a young painter that she nicknamed Bobo. Spent the night slumming in the Bowery and Chinatown, then invited some characters home for a night of binge drinking, merriment and mayhem. Invited all the blue blood of New York to a birthday party for H.H. Carr, Maharaja of Amber. She was delighted as the faint of heart in the crowd collapsed and screamed for the exits, as soon as they learned that the Maharaja was her pet boa constrictor. Spent an evening teaching a young Rudolph Valentino how to do the Argentine tango, the at the time forbidden dance, in a New York nightclub. In her less adventurous years, Amy contented herself by collecting Buddhas, pearls, tattoos, snakes, and wealthy eccentric friends. She threw outrageous parties where she showed up dressed as an Egyptian queen, and yet another time made a grand entrance on an elephant, distributed live chameleons as party favors, and performed one-woman magic shows. Husband number 3 died in 1914. She then again moved to Paris with her children, changed the spelling of her name from Amy to Émile, and put her West 56 house on the market, and continued in her libidinous path. Among her notable lovers was occultist Aleister Crowley, who was infatuated and asked for her hand in marriage multiple times. She steadfastly refused. 4 years later, she married again in London to a Russian prince named Alexander Miskinov. The marriage, which only lasted for 2 tempestuous years, included very public speculations of him having an affair with Amy's 15-year-old adopted daughter, and she bearing his baby in secret, whom Amy sent away when the child was a month old. In 1925, Amy married for the last time at the age of 61 to another Russian prince named Mstislav Galitzin, who was 26 years old. When asked by a friend if this was husband number 5 or 6, she replied, "The prince is my 12th husband, if I include in my matrimonial list 7 oriental husbands, not registered under the laws of the Occident." Although this marriage proved as short-lasting as her previous one, she kept the title Princess Galitzin for the rest of her life. She later moved back to New York, taking a townhouse at 19 East 92nd Street, filling it with her collection of Eastern art and artifacts. If her physical activities had mellowed as she aged, she had no regrets. In 1936, she published a new memoir, And I'd Do It Again. In 1941, when, as she regretfully put it, she was too old to play, she became reunited with her mother from a previous incarnation. Her death of pneumonia was on February 7, 1941, at the age of 78. She passed away peacefully in her apartment at New York's Savoy Plaza Hotel. She was buried in the family plot in California's Sacramento City Cemetery. Newspapers around the country paid due homage to the Queen of Bohemia. Then, it seems, shortly afterwards, she was simply forgotten. She is still criticized for her hedonistic excesses. But Amy's enthusiasm for life and adventure, "I would try anything once," she is quoted as saying, disdain for prejudice and gleeful flaunting of social mores continue to inspire a cult following. "I have been accused of living adventurously, and if I have dared to stick my nose into trouble just because the game was fun, does it make me a brazen hussy?" Amy once wrote, "If I could live it again, this very long life of mine, I would love to do so." Well, my dear friends, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. What an amazing life Amy had. Mind you, she had the money to be able to indulge. That helps, doesn't it? You can go on lots of adventures if you've got plenty of cash to back it up. Look at that house that's on the screen now. Can you imagine being given that at the age of 18? Wow. I mean, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? The thought of so much money. That was an immense fortune that she inherited. Absolutely incredible. I wonder what her other siblings did. You don't really hear of their lives. I guess they just quietly enjoyed their wealth in the background, but Amy was living it up. Why not? You've only got one life, as they say, so get out and enjoy it. And she certainly did that. She burnt the candle at both ends. And a very adventurous spirit, though. I love the fact of her, that someone so wealthy, really a socialite, accepted into the elite circles, had tattoos all over her arms. That's wonderful. Oh, she was having a ball, wasn't she? Doing the Vienna Vigil. I'd like to do the Vienna Vigil. I wonder if there's a recording of that out there. I'll have to check out the Vienna Vigil. I'm going to have a look after this, and if it is there, if it's not copyrighted, I'll put it on here. Well, I had a look online and on YouTube and could find no sign of the Vienna Vigil. What a shame. Has that been lost to history? Any music buffs out there, any vintage music buffs, I would be delighted if you could find me the Vienna Vigil. I would love to hear it. What a shame. I was hoping that I could share it with you here. So what do you think about this headline here? Mrs. Gouraud's cast-off daughter finds a husband? ? The astonishing Cinderella-like life of a very poor child who is suddenly lifted into the lap of luxury by a whimsical multi-millionairess, then thrown out to go and work for a living. Unfortunately, I haven't found the rest of the article. What happened? Did she disown her adopted daughter at some stage? Was the daughter muscling in on her amorous adventures? I mean, imagine being adopted into that wealth and then thrown out of it when you're used to it. Horrible. I wonder what happened. I wonder what the... obviously these are entertainment vignettes. I can't go and research the whole lineage. I'm not sure what happened to the daughter. Did she live the rest of the days in poverty, or what she might class as poverty? It might be still very wealthy to you and I, but I would be interested to know what happened there. Obviously, Amy had a hissy fit and kicked the daughter out. That pesky Russian prince started all that, didn't he? Although I included this image in the presentation, I didn't give it a title, and I'll tell you what it is. This is the Dance of All Nations Ball, and they were all the guests. Apparently there were 150 guests attended it, and you can just see Amy there, seated in the middle to the right with a tiara mounted with a star on it. She's looking very, 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 very distinguished, and the gentleman on the far right there looks like he is perfectly suited for the Vienna Vigil. I just wanted to point this painting of Amy by the artist Edmund Russell. Isn't that fabulous? Not only the painting's great. Is that her represented as the noble Hindu woman? I'm not really sure. You'd have to get your magnifying glass out. But what a fabulous painting! And look at the frame. It seems to have two cobras facing off at the top there. And all around it, if I'm correct, are all these little Buddhas all the way around it. What a fabulous frame. You can see a chair in the background to the left and a radiator behind that. Is that a huge painting? I mean, if it is, it'd be absolutely stupendous. Or is it a small painting and sitting on a table in the foreground? I can't really see the edge there. It could be a table to the right, the edge of a table to the right. Either way, what a wonderful piece of art. I wonder what has happened to the original and where it is. If anybody knows, please let me know. Well, I can't say that I own anything to do with Amy, but I do have something from one of her entourage, Jean Cocteau. I hope I pronounced his name correctly. Any French speakers out there may confirm or insult me. Yes, it's an original artwork, watercolor or gouache. I think I heard that it is a design for a plate. Yeah, I think he did a series of plates, and this was one of the designs. So I do have indirectly a connection to the lady in the story. And on the rear of it is somebody has posted a write-up about him. An interesting piece. I've had this for quite so many years now. So, I think I'm going to wrap it up now. I don't really have anything more to say. And if I do, it has escaped my attention momentarily. So, on that note, I will say goodbye and God bless. Take care. Until next time, my friends. Bye-bye.